Under a sky stretched wide with both promise and peril, Emily Dawson stood alone on the worn porch of Dawson Ranch, the wind tugging at her simple calico dress. The Dakota Territory of 1878 was no place for the faint of heart, especially for a woman whose future could be decided by desperate men and broken dreams. She had come here believing strength and perseverance would be enough, that a daughter's steady hands and hopeful heart could hold together what drought and debt were tearing apart. But fate had other plans, and sometimes salvation comes from the places you least expect, and from the hands of those the world teaches you to fear. Because when the world decides you're worth nothing, it only takes one person to prove just how wrong they are. The noonday sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty main street of Clearwater as Emily Dawson stepped onto the hastily built stage outside the town hall. Her heart hammered against her ribs, every instinct screaming at her to run. But there was nowhere left to go. The townsfolk gathered below, fanning themselves lazily, their faces a mixture of curiosity, judgment, and thinly veiled pity. She could feel their eyes crawling over her, evaluating her like cattle up for sale. Emily clutched her hands tightly in front of her simple green dress, her knuckles white. Somewhere near the front, she spotted her father, Thomas Dawson, his face ashen, his hat clutched against his chest. His failure to save the ranch weighed as heavily on him as the chains of shame did on her. Marshall Crawford, the man who had orchestrated this entire spectacle, stood tall and smug beside the auctioneer. His suit was sharp, his smile sharper, and his words smooth as poisoned honey. "Gentlemen," Crawford called, his voice carrying over the crowd, "today you have the rare opportunity to secure not just a fine marriage prospect, but to support the betterment of this proud community." Emily stared straight ahead, refusing to let her chin drop, refusing to let them see her break. Crawford continued, "Miss Emily Dawson, daughter of Thomas Dawson, whose ranch lies at the heart of this valley, is available for union by lawful marriage. The starting offer is $5,000, the amount necessary to clear her family's debt." A murmur ran through the crowd. Men leaned closer, their calculations plain on their faces. Emily felt herself growing smaller under their gaze, every ounce of pride and defiance draining from her in the hot, heavy air. Somewhere in the shadowed edges of the gathering, a figure watched, a silent presence, apart from the others. Swift River, known among the white folk as James Blackhawk, stood with arms crossed, his dark eyes unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. He had seen injustice before, too often. But what he saw now, the public bartering of a young woman's life, kindled a fire in his chest that demanded action. He was a man straddling two worlds, belonging fully to neither. But some things a man couldn't ignore. The auctioneer raised his gavel. $5,000, gentlemen. Do I hear a bid?" A heavy silence fell. Swift River stepped forward from the crowd, the fringe of his worn buckskins brushing the dusty ground. $10,000, he said, his voice low but clear enough to halt every whisper in the square. Heads snapped toward him, gasps echoed. Emily's heart stumbled in her chest. She turned, finding him, really seeing him, for the first time. A stranger, yet somehow not. Marshall Crawford's face darkened with rage, but he forced a sneer. "This is a respectable affair, Blackhawk. You're not welcome here." Swift River said nothing. Instead, he untied a small pouch from his belt and tossed it at the auctioneer's feet. Gold coins spilled out, glittering in the dust. Enough to silence even Crawford. Thomas Dawson, stunned into silence, finally found his voice. "Emily?" Emily's mouth was dry. She felt the weight of every eye upon her, but in Swift River's gaze, there was no hunger, no calculation, only a steady, patient question. Was she property to be bought and sold, or was she someone worth standing for? The choice was no longer the crowd's, it was hers, and she would choose. The air between Emily and the crowd crackled with tension. She could feel Marshall Crawford's fury, could see Thomas Dawson's disbelief, and yet, most of all, she saw Swift River standing there, unmoving, unafraid. The auctioneer stammered, unsure whether to proceed, while Crawford stepped forward, his voice oily and coaxing. "Miss Dawson," he said, pitching his words for all to hear, "you don't have to accept this interference. I can still ensure your family's security, with no shame and no scandal. You need only say the word." Emily's fingers clenched at her sides. Shame? Scandal? Was there anything left to protect after being paraded before her neighbors like a prize sow? She drew a breath so deep it hurt. Then she turned, not to Crawford, but to the man who had offered no promises, no sweetened lies, only an honest bid and a silent strength. "I accept," Emily said. Her voice shook, but it carried, clear enough for every soul in Clearwater to hear. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Crawford's face blanched, then flushed crimson with rage, but he could do nothing without revealing the true nature of his dealings. Swift River moved through the gathered people without hesitation, stepping onto the platform and offering his hand. His palm was calloused from a lifetime of labor, his grip firm and certain. Emily placed her hand in his. The world seemed to tilt beneath her, and for a moment she thought she might collapse from sheer relief. But Swift River's steady grip anchored her. Without a word, he helped her down from the platform. Thomas Dawson stumbled forward, his voice hoarse. "Emily, are you sure?" She turned to him, searching his face. Her father, who had tried so hard to shield her from the world's cruelties, but had been beaten down by forces too great to fight alone. "I'm sure, Pa," she said softly. "This was my choice." Thomas pressed a trembling hand to her shoulder. Pride and heartbreak warred in his eyes. As Swift River led Emily away from the stunned gathering, the whispering started in earnest. Speculation, judgment, fear. None of it mattered anymore. She walked beside him, her green skirts brushing against his buckskins, her future uncertain, but for the first time, chosen. They reached the edge of the crowd where Swift River's horse waited, a sturdy roan mare with intelligent eyes. Swift River paused, studying Emily carefully. He spoke at last, his voice a low rumble of respect. "You are brave," he said simply, "braver than most I have known." Emily smiled faintly, though her heart still raced. "I don't feel brave," she admitted. "I just couldn't stay where I wasn't wanted." Swift River nodded, as if this made perfect sense. He swung into the saddle with effortless grace, then extended his hand once more. "Come," he said. "We leave before Crawford thinks to change the rules again." Emily hesitated only a moment. Then she gathered her skirts, placed her foot in the stirrup, and let him lift her up behind him. The horse moved forward, and with each rhythmic step away from the town, the tight band around her chest loosened. The prairie opened up before them, vast and wild and unbroken by fences. Behind them, Clearwater grew smaller and smaller until it was just a smudge against the horizon. And in that moment, Emily understood. She wasn't running away. She was riding towards something new, something fiercely her own. Night had fallen by the time Swift River slowed the mare to a halt beside a narrow creek, its waters singing softly over smooth stones. The prairie stretched out around them, endless and unknowable under the stars. He dismounted first, then turned to help Emily down, his touch careful, never assuming. Once her boots hit the earth, he stepped back, giving her space. "We rest here," he said simply. Emily nodded, grateful beyond words. Her body ached from the long ride, but it was the endless tension, the constant fear of what might happen, that had exhausted her most. Swift River built a fire with practiced ease, coaxing a small, steady flame to life with a few dry twigs. The warmth seeped into Emily's bones as she sat near the fire, hugging her knees to her chest. For a while they said nothing, just listened to the creek and the distant howl of a lone coyote. Finally Emily spoke, her voice quiet. "You risked a lot back there." Swift River, tending the fire, glanced up at her. "Some things are worth risking." She looked into the flames, feeling her throat tighten. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he replied. "I know what I saw. A woman being treated like a possession, with no voice in her own fate." Emily swallowed hard. "You could have kept riding, could have let it happen." Swift River's face was a study in shadow and firelight. "My father once told me, The world does not need more men who look away. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackle of burning wood. Emily pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. I don't know what comes next, she admitted, hating how small her voice sounded. I don't know where to go or who I'm supposed to be now. Swift River added a log to the fire, then sat across from her, his gaze steady. You don't have to know yet, he said. First you heal, then you choose. The simplicity of it broke something open inside her, a tight knot of fear and expectation she hadn't even realized she carried. I'm scared, she whispered. Swift River nodded once. Only fools are never scared. Emily managed a shaky laugh. Then I must be the wisest woman on the plains. That drew the faintest ghost of a smile from him, not mocking but sharing, understanding. He unrolled a small blanket from his saddlebag and offered it to her. Sleep, I'll keep watch. Emily hesitated. Every instinct told her not to trust, not to lower her guard. But she remembered the way he had stood between her and Crawford's power, how he had offered help without demanding anything in return. Slowly she accepted the blanket. She lay down beside the fire, her back to the warmth, her eyes watching Swift River's silhouette as he sat, silent and unmoving, facing the darkness. For the first time in weeks, she drifted into sleep without terror gnawing at her heart. And somewhere in the small, hidden places of her soul, hope took root again. A hope that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone after all. The morning came sharp and cold, the sky a pale wash of silver above the plains. Emily stirred beneath the blanket, the sense of smoke and damp earth filling her senses. Swift River was already awake, crouched by the creek washing his hands. The early light catching the smooth planes of his face, he moved with the quiet efficiency of a man accustomed to survival. Emily sat up slowly, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Despite everything, she had slept deeper than she could remember. Her body still aching, but her spirit a little less raw. He returned to the fire, offering her a strip of dried meat and a canteen of cool water. She accepted both with a murmured, "Thank you." They ate in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence born from shared space, from unspoken understanding. As they prepared to leave, Swift River scanned the horizon, his posture shifting, tensing slightly. "What is it?" Emily asked, instinctively tightening her grip on the blanket. He didn't answer right away. His dark eyes swept the endless plains with the keen alertness of a hunter. "Riders," he said finally, his voice low. "Far off, following our trail." Emily felt the blood drain from her face. "Crawford's men?" "Most likely." Without another word, he helped her onto the mare and swung up behind her. They rode hard, keeping the creek to their left, the rise of the land providing some cover. Hours passed in a blur of hooves pounding the earth and the burning sting of wind against Emily's cheeks. Still, Swift River kept them moving with relentless determination, pausing only when absolutely necessary. By midday, they reached a rugged stretch of land, a shallow canyon lined with scrub and rocky outcroppings. Swift River reined in the mare and studied their surroundings. "We'll camp here tonight," he said. "Too risky to keep riding with them close behind." Emily slid from the saddle, legs trembling with exhaustion. She wanted to argue, to say they should keep moving, but one look at Swift River's face told her it would do no good. He was calculating, always calculating. Their best chance of survival meant rest, even when fear screamed otherwise. As they made a small camp under a rocky overhang, Emily finally asked the question gnawing at her heart. "Why are they so determined to find me?" Swift River finished tying the mare's reins to a scrub tree before answering. "You humiliated a powerful man," he said simply. "Crawford sees your defiance as a wound to his pride. Men like him, they don't heal, they only seek revenge." Emily hugged her arms around herself, shivering despite the warmth of the sun. "I never wanted to cause trouble. I just—" She trailed off, unsure how to explain the simple desire for a life of her own choosing. "You chose freedom," Swift River said, his voice like stone worn smooth by river currents. "And that frightens men like Crawford more than anything." She sat by the fire, staring into the low flames. "What if he catches us?" Swift River crouched beside her, his hand resting lightly on his knee. His presence was solid, grounding. "Then we fight," he said. "Together." Emily turned her head, meeting his gaze fully. There was no false hope in his words, no empty promises, only the steady certainty of a man who had chosen his path long ago and would walk it to the end, no matter the cost. She swallowed past the lump rising in her throat. "I'm not much of a fighter." "You are stronger than you know," he said, almost gently, and somehow sitting there in the middle of nowhere, hunted and weary, Emily believed him. The canyon walls pressed close as twilight draped the land in deep purples and grays. Emily crouched low beside the fire Swift River had expertly smothered, her heart pounding like a trapped bird in her chest. They heard the riders long before they saw them. Distant hoofbeats muffled by the thick air, the sharp bark of a man's voice echoing faintly against the stone. Swift River returned from his scouting, silent as a shadow. He knelt beside Emily, his breath steady despite the tension radiating from him. "6 men," he said in a low voice. "Blackwood leads them." Emily stiffened at the name. Samuel Blackwood, Crawford's right-hand man. Ruthless, merciless, and smart enough to be dangerous. "They're combing the canyon," Swift River continued. "Not many places to hide once they get closer." Emily licked her dry lips. "What do we do?" He glanced at her, and for the first time, she saw the flicker of hesitation in his eyes. Not fear, but the weight of responsibility. "We don't let them find us," he said. "And if they do—" His hand brushed the hilt of his knife. "Well, we make sure they regret it." The plan was simple. Keep moving. Stay hidden. Use the narrowest parts of the canyon to mask their trail. Emily clutched the mare's reins tightly as they led the horse through a shallow, rocky creek bed, their boots splashing softly in the frigid water. The darkness thickened, and the canyon twisted like a living thing, its walls casting strange, shifting shadows. Every sound seemed magnified. The crunch of gravel, the distant call of a night bird. They were rounding a bend when the trap sprung. A shout rang out, and suddenly the narrow passage ahead was blocked by 2 mounted men, rifles raised. Behind them, more figures emerged from the gloom, hemming them in. "End of the road, Black Hawk," Blackwood's voice drawled, cruel and mocking. "And you brought the little lady along for the ride. How touching." Swift River pushed Emily behind him in one smooth motion. His knife flashed into his hand, and in the same movement, he unhooked the mare's reins, slapping the horse's flank. The mare bolted into the darkness, drawing the attention of 2 pursuers. "Stay behind me," Swift River ordered, voice low and fierce. Emily stumbled back as the first shot rang out, the crack echoing off the canyon walls. Swift River moved like flowing water, closing the distance to the nearest gunman in a heartbeat. His knife found its mark with brutal precision, sending the man crashing from his horse. Chaos erupted. Emily ducked as bullets tore through the cold night air. She scrambled for cover behind a boulder, heart hammering as Swift River danced among the enemy, each movement economical and deadly. A hand grabbed her roughly from behind. She screamed, twisting and struggling. Blackwood's snarling face loomed above her, his fingers digging into her arm. "You're coming with me, girl," he hissed. "Crawford wants a proper reunion." Before she could react, a shadow detached itself from the darkness. Swift River slammed into Blackwood, sending him sprawling. The 2 men grappled fiercely, dirt and blood mixing as they fought. Emily stumbled back, gasping for air, watching with wide, terrified eyes. Swift River gained the upper hand quickly, pinning Blackwood to the ground. His knife hovered at Blackwood's throat. "Yield," Swift River growled, his voice low and deadly. Blackwood spat blood, defiance still burning in his eyes. "You'll hang for this, savage." Swift River's blade pressed closer, a hair's breadth from ending it. For a breathless moment, Emily thought he would. Instead, Swift River stood, yanking Blackwood to his feet and shoving him toward the remaining men, who had lost their appetite for the fight after seeing their leader bested. "Take him," Swift River commanded, voice like iron, "and tell Crawford, if he comes for her again, I won't show mercy." The men hesitated, then hauled Blackwood onto a horse and rode off into the night, defeated and humiliated. Emily sagged against the rock, trembling. Swift River approached, his breathing heavy but controlled. "You're hurt," she said, her voice shaking. He shook his head. "Nothing serious?" She looked up at him, really looked, and something shifted inside her, something that had been locked away behind fear and pride and grief. Without thinking, she threw her arms around him, bearing her face against his chest. For a long moment, he stood frozen. Then his arms came around her, steady and sure, anchoring her to the earth. "You're safe now," he murmured against her hair. But they both knew it was only for tonight. The real battle was still coming. The first rays of dawn spilled over the canyon walls, painting the broken land in soft gold. Emily sat beside the low fire Swift River had rebuilt after the fight, her blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Every muscle in her body ached, but it was a good kind of ache, the kind that came from surviving. Swift River crouched a few feet away, silently tending to the horse's injured leg. They hadn't spoken much since the battle. There hadn't been need. Some things didn't require words. As the sun climbed higher, they prepared to move. The Dawson Ranch was still several miles away, and both of them knew Crawford wouldn't take the defeat lightly. "You sure you're ready?" Swift River asked, tightening the last strap on the saddle. Emily nodded, though her heart twisted at the thought of what lay ahead. "I'm ready." They rode in silence through the canyon, emerging onto the open prairie. The land stretched before them, endless and wild, a place where dreams could either die quickly or take root stubbornly against all odds. The Dawson homestead came into view just before noon, smoke curling from the chimney, a familiar figure chopping wood in the yard. Thomas Dawson straightened when he saw them, his axe dropping into the dirt. "Emily!" he shouted, rushing forward. His voice cracked with relief as he reached her, pulling her down from the horse and into his arms. "I thought I'd lost you." "I'm all right, Pa," she whispered, though tears burned her throat. "Thanks to him." Thomas turned to Swift River, his expression a complicated mix of gratitude, guilt, and something harder to define. After a long moment, he extended his hand. "Thank you," he said simply. Swift River shook it, the gesture heavy with unspoken understanding. Inside the house, over strong coffee and stale biscuits, they pieced together what had happened. Thomas had heard rumors, Crawford stirring up the town, whispers of plans to seize the Dawson land, threats against anyone who stood in the way. "He won't stop," Thomas said grimly. "Men like him, they don't know how." Emily stared into her cup, the weight of it all pressing down on her. She had come so far, fought so hard, only to find the battle wasn't over. Maybe it never would be. After a long silence, Swift River spoke. "You don't have to keep fighting alone," he said, his voice steady. "Neither of you." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "And what are you proposing?" Swift River glanced at Emily, and for the first time, there was no hesitation in his gaze, only quiet certainty. "I know what it is to belong nowhere," he said, "to be seen as less by men who understand neither side. But I also know what it is to build something new, not given by others, but chosen." He turned fully to Emily now, his dark eyes locking with hers. "You don't have to choose between your world and mine," he said. "We can make a new one, together." The room seemed to hold its breath. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs, not from fear this time, but from the terrifying, beautiful weight of what he was offering. A life not dictated by others, a future not handed down like scraps, a choice. She stood slowly, moving to stand in front of him. "I choose that future," she said, voice trembling but sure. "With you." Swift River's mouth twitched in the smallest, rarest of smiles. He reached out, his hand cradling her cheek in a touch so gentle it nearly broke her. Thomas cleared his throat loudly, rising from the table. "I'll just check on the horses," he mumbled, retreating outside with surprising speed. Emily laughed, a sound that felt foreign and wonderful after so much fear. She leaned into Swift River's hand, her eyes shining with something stronger than hope. Conviction. Outside, the prairie wind stirred, carrying with it the scent of sage and distant rain. Change was coming, slow, relentless, unstoppable. But for the first time, Emily wasn't afraid. Whatever storms lay ahead, she would face them with this man beside her, not as a prize to be claimed, not as a burden to be borne, but as an equal, as a partner, as a woman who had chosen her own destiny. The Dawson Ranch, their ranch now, would stand as proof that even the most broken places could be made whole again, that even in a world built on cruelty and division, new beginnings were possible. Together, Emily and Swift River stepped out onto the porch, the vastness of the land unfolding before them like an unwritten story. A story they would write side by side, one choice at a time.